Welcome back to the Anti-Meta Meta Club, where your hosts got COVID, but luckily the race is pretty sick too. I'm sorry I said that. Let's get into it. The anti-meta car of the week is the Citroën once again. Though not nearly as fast as the Aston Martin, it's incredibly good on tires, and even though none of the cars are really going to be good enough to not take tires, those laps when the tires are getting pretty old do still count. And the Citroën, with its really good tire wear, is going to be able to maintain pace better than pretty much any of the other cars except for maybe the Trophy. I didn't really have the energy to grind out this TT as much as I do in previous ones, but I got a top 100, which is, I guess, okay. Key had a better time, and there's another driver with a 0.5. I think I can get a 0.3 or a 0.4 if I really grinded it out, but yeah, there's a lot left of this car. The Aston is definitely the meta car this week, but there are a lot of other cars within the top 100. As the lap starts, angle yourself so you can get onto the curb, all the way up on the curb once you get to it, and we're going to look for the 50-meter board hanging on the right. Once you're all the way past it, I want you to start turning in, but don't brake until you get your car all the way flat on the asphalt. Treating this as a double apex corner, I'm going to decelerate until I get past the first apex, and we want to hit the second apex when we're exiting right about when we hit this white sign, right when you're about to pass it on the right. Allow the car to rotate and don't get on the throttle until you know that you can hit that throttle and stay on it all the way to the exit. You do not want to come off the throttle here. It's uphill and it's a very long full throttle section, so anything that you do that will delay the throttle or take away any momentum is going to cost you a lot going up this hill. Note how I use a lot of the curbs, but I'm going to try to stay off the grass entirely. That's the best way to do it. You've got to hit this left late enough so that you can hit this right before you hit the front of that curb, because it will put you in the air. Approaching the next corner, just like the first corner, we're going to aim so we get all the way up on the curb. Just like T1, after going up on the curb, we turn in at the 50-meter board and we're going to hit the brakes after that. Using gentle brake pressure, I like to aim for this white line that's just past the dark blue line that's past the curb. Looking on the left on the infield, it looks like there's a light pull, there's some kind of pull, and right before that pull is when you want to get on that throttle fully in fourth gear and stay on the throttle. You shouldn't be steering really hard, you shouldn't be making the tires screech, but you're probably going to make them make some noise. As long as you don't come off the throttle after you get on it, you should be fine. If you have to, it is better than going in the grass, but it is very important for these corners that have a really long exit that you get on the throttle and you stay on that throttle to the next corner. Setting up for the chicane, you want to hit this curb late. If you hit the front part, the triangular shape that's a little bit different color than the rest of the curb that doesn't have the red stripes on it, it's going to make you bounce. So you've got to hit it right where the red stripes are. Continue braking as you get all the way onto it, and when you hit the 50-meter board, that's when you're going to start turning in and trail braking, and you should be in third gear just briefly. Once you've got your car aimed correctly, you're going to shift back up to fourth gear, and you're going to do that before you step on the throttle. Now, there are a few ways to go over the chicanes. You can actually cut it a lot more and put your right tires all the way on the top of the curb here, and that's fine as long as you can stabilize the car. However, if you're trying to carry a lot of speed through this section and you want to take that line, it's probably going to make the car bounce. You can take it like I am here, putting just your left tires on the top of the curb so it doesn't really upset the car just as much, but you might have to make the sacrifice of going over the grass just a little bit through the middle to make sure that you can maintain speed all the way through the chicane. My basic rule for this is just don't try to do too much. If you're going to go over the grass, it's going to make the car slip. It's also going to make the car jump, so make sure you're not turning or shifting the weight a lot when you do that. As you can see, I chose not to go over the grass on the exit because the car was already almost unstable and I thought that I was going to slip out, and if you slip, you might not go off the track, but you're going to lose your momentum, so you got to do everything you can to keep the car steady. You want to go as straight as possible over the chicane, but since that's not actually possible, you do have to shift the weight back and forth in the middle of the chicane, and if you do that in combination with going over one of the bumps really hard or going over the grass, it's going to upset the car, and that's going to either make you crash or just lose momentum. The best thing I've found is to slow down a lot at the beginning and then get on that throttle, pushing yourself all the way through, no matter if you're going to go over the curbs or around them, and just try to keep the car as steady as possible, steering as little as you can and shifting as little weight as you possibly can. Going up this little hill, you don't have to go all the way to the left. In fact, where I went was actually probably too far. You don't have to go that far just to set up for this left-hander right here. Aiming to put your car in the curb right here, once you get all the way past the yellow numbering on the track, that's when you want to hit the brakes. Brake heavily in a straight line, getting yourself down to third gear, and you should notice this line right here. Once you get past that, you're going to turn in and start trail braking after you've gotten on the flat part of the track. Getting all the way down to second gear, notice how I'm gradually adding steering as I'm taking away brake. I like to avoid hitting the curb here, even though we would be able to use a little bit less steering. It makes it so it's a lot harder to get on the throttle really hard really early. Be careful you don't use too much of that exit curb because it can pull you entirely off the track. Get to the left side of the track, and right before the marshals, you want to start turning in. Right before you hit this curb, you want to lift off the throttle before you hit the brakes, then add brakes so you get the right angle as close to that right side curb as you possibly can. Turn in right at the end of that first curb, downshift to third quickly, and then take a look at this angle. I like to actually go straight over this curb. Rather than using it to rotate, I like to go straight over it, stay in third gear, and then get on that throttle early. As long as you use a lot of throttle and you're going pretty straight, you should be able to steer away from that curb, at least in time trial. Once again, going up in the curb, and once again using the 50-meter board, we're going to turn in and brake simultaneously, making sure we don't brake all the way because that will cause understeer. We want to bleed off speed, get to second gear, and then get on throttle in second gear, trying to just graze this inside curb and then track all the way out to the outside one. I like to apex right before the end of the curb. It's a very late apex, allowing us to carry a lot of speed into the next straight, which of course is really important for the next lap. As always, stay well away from the grass because that will pull you entirely off the track, and once you get back on the track, just go straight to the exit. You don't need to set up for your next lap unless you know this lap isn't quite good enough. For these long corners, regardless of how you're going to do it, if you're going to do a single or a double apex, you do not want to decelerate super hard all the way at the beginning of the corner and then just try to floor it out. What you've got to do is gradually bleed off speed as you enter the corner, and then if it's going to be a double apex or a single apex, you then of course get on the throttle after carrying a lot of speed in. Don't bleed off and lose all your momentum at first and then try to floor it out the other side. You got to carry a lot of speed into these longer corners. The first corner I double apex, the second one I like to late apex. I don't actually know why I end up going faster this specific way. I can never quite go faster on this one by doing a double apex, and I can't go faster on the first corner with a single apex. I couldn't tell you why. They are slightly different shapes, so I'm sure that has to do with it, but yeah. Double apex the first one, single apex the second one, and for the chicane, I talked about it a lot in the breakdown. You really want to go just as straight as you possibly can, but I've had the most luck by decelerating a lot at the beginning and then floor it out. Kind of like the exact opposite of what I said for the big sweeper corners. This hairpin's really interesting. It's really easy to break the tires loose. You do not want to do that, especially on a hairpin. And you have an increased risk of doing that if you go on the curb, so I just like to avoid the curb. For this corner, I like to really abuse the curb, trying to, again, go almost straight over that second corner, being careful not to go all the way off the track. And if you are in the race itself, when your tires start wearing, the fronts are probably going to wear a lot more because of those sweepers, and if you try to take that same line and be really aggressive with the throttle, it's probably just going to make you understeer into the grass, so be very wary of your tire wear in this race with any car that you use, not just the high tire wear cars, because even this car can suffer from it. Not to make too many excuses for myself, but I still do not feel very good, and it was the same for earlier today when I was doing these races. Funny enough, the last time I got COVID, this track was actually the daily race C track back then as well. Is it a sign? No, but it's funny. Anyways, I digress. This race is actually a lot of fun. It's Group 4. And it is another race where you are required to take a pit stop, but you are not required to take tires. However, it is a much better idea to take tires. The Renault Trophy, as well as this car, are both known to have incredible tire wear for the class, and it's still pretty risky not taking tires. It's possible with both of these cars, and I did a couple races where I didn't take tires, but I definitely suggest taking tires. If you decide from the beginning that you are not going to take tires, then it is in your best interest to pit as soon as you possibly can, because the earlier you pit, the less chance you'll have of running into traffic. Of course, if you're in the front, then the later you pit, the less chance you'll have of running into traffic. As I've discussed in the past, it is best to look at your pit strategy more as various options rather than just a really strict plan from the start. Before we continue, I want to talk about how funny it is that I tried to pass Didico on the first corner. If you know Karatza from the single-player races, this is him. This is the real Karatza, Didico. He is one of the world's best Gran Turismo drivers, and I knew from the beginning I wouldn't be able to pass him. I don't know why I tried to. I should have just bumped him. It didn't cost me too much time, but yeah, there was no way I was going to pass him. I just thought it was funny. Anyways, my plan is to pit anywhere between lap 3 and lap 7. That should split the tires, not necessarily evenly, but in a way that I will have tire life on either stint. Now, obviously, it's going to be worse in the longer stint, but it's going to be infinitely better than just not taking tires. Even taking away 3 laps from your tire wear by pitting after lap 3 is better than not taking tires at all. Knowing your approximate pit window, you can then approach the pits each lap, knowing that you're going to determine it at the last second. So if you're following really closely to a pack of people and it looks like they're not going to go in the pits and it's the beginning of your pit window, I would suggest definitely going in. If it looks like a lot of people are going in and you're on lap 3, then I would suggest skipping it. Because no matter how good these people are, if they're racing next to each other, they're probably going to be battling, and if they're not battling, they're still going to be affecting each other's trajectory throughout the track, and it's going to slow people down. On top of that, you have to worry about the dirty air. So, like I've been saying all the time, pit when you can make sure that there's just not going to be anyone else going to the pits with you. Obviously, you can't control that entirely, but if you can help it, try to pit by yourself so you can come out by yourself as well. Now, I did talk a lot about the pit window and how it is not the best strategy to not take tires for this race. You may have noticed that Canadian Bacon Slayers was in the same car that we were in, and he pit right at the very beginning of the race. The very first opportunity he had, he pit. Now, if you look at this pack in front of us, you can see exactly why that is. If this were a pack of the very best drivers in the region, then it might work have everyone keep a relatively good pace, but instead it's some of the best drivers in the world, some of the best drivers in the region, and then some random drivers who are just trying to have some casual daily races. So of course you're not going to be able to maintain pace like that. While we're out here wasting time, Slayers is actually just driving in completely clean air right now, and since everyone has to take the same amount of pit stops, it all ends up being the same. The average lap time over both stints is what you want to look at. The risky part about Slayer's strategy is that if we're able to break free, or if any of us are able to break free, and we do end up taking the tires, then we're going to have a distinct advantage against him if we end up having to battle him on track. However, if we get held up enough, it's not going to matter how much faster we are than Slayers, because he'll be so far ahead of us by the time we go through the pits that it really won't matter what his pace is like. In the end, races like this come with an inherent danger to any kind of strategy, but I do think it's safer overall just to take tires because it only costs 2 seconds. And when your tires are really bad, you can lose more than an entire second per lap for multiple laps, and so you can do the math there. The trade-off is really interesting, but it is safer to take tires pretty much in any situation. Jumping forward just a little bit, you've got to be really careful if you're going to take a really wide line on this corner because it's so easy just to sneak in. Now, I don't think he did that on accident. It actually kind of looked like he was just giving me the position. I don't know if he knows who I am and was just worried that I was going to try to pass him anyways, but it really looked like he completely gave me that position. If he didn't, that is a pretty common mistake that you see people make, just going too wide there. But that seemed too wide to be a mistake. I really don't know, because I don't think I actually know who D Luna is. I want you to know, however, that if you leave even a car's width, people will take advantage of that. And if people sneak in there and they're next to you by the exit, you don't have any right to push them away. And even if you did, they'd be on the inside and they would have an advantage there. And while logically you should be able to carry more speed on the outside, it's going to be really difficult to not hit them when they're trying to make these really aggressive moves, and so you're probably not going to be able to maintain momentum like you thought you could. So that's why it's better to maintain a really close line if you've got people racing against you, even if you might have to sacrifice a little bit of speed. I determined earlier on that I really like pitting at lap 4 at the earliest, and when the next person in line, or one of the next people in line, went in lap 3, I knew that it was definitely the best option because I have completely free air right now. With Didiko 1.7 seconds ahead, I'm not going to catch Didiko because, like I said before, he's one of the world's best Gran Turismo drivers. And on top of that, that is more than enough space. I won't get dirty air and I won't get a slipstream from that either. Now, initially the plan, of course, was to have as much free air as we possibly could, but you can't really determine if anyone's going to have any kind of incidents, and Plaka and someone else got into something, and Plaka got a penalty, but obviously not his fault, not something we could predict, but it doesn't change the actual strategy. The strategy itself is still sound, it's just that anything can happen. Now, I wanted to talk about this while it was happening on screen, but it already passed. Make sure you're very careful with what you hit in the pits. If you've been playing this game long enough to be using this guide, you probably already know, but you can't accidentally push something and then make a change afterwards. If you hit that you don't want tires, you're not going to get tires. If you hit that you do want tires, but you didn't, you're getting tires. You can't just say, no, never mind, which is really wild, and it's actually cost people real money at real Gran Turismo tournaments by accidentally hitting the wrong button, so be very careful when you're selecting stuff in the pits. Before I go on, I want to apologize. I know I'm rambling a lot in this week's guide, and my voice sounds really funny. I am struggling a little bit, but I'm going to try to focus up here. Okay, like I was saying before, our buddy Bacon Slayers, who just unfortunately went off right there, did not take tires, and I did take tires. So if we were to battle throughout this section right here, I would probably have a pretty distinct advantage, and it probably wouldn't be out of the question for me to be able to put a pass on him. Slayers and I actually have pretty similar pace. He's faster than me a lot of the times, and he can hold me off, but with me having these better tires, chances are I'd be able to pass him pretty easily right there. Even if we had the exact same pace, because of my strategy, I would have been able to probably pass him. So that is the difference in the strategy right there. We both probably ran into things we didn't expect. We had completely different strategies, but at the end of the day, the strategy that I'm using, I would have a distinct advantage. So that is why I would suggest using this strategy. And like I said before, it's not a bad idea to use his strategy, because if he had a perfect race and I was the one that ran into more issues, which would be highly likely because of all the traffic that I encountered, then he'd just be able to take off with it. But if you do end up 1 versus 1 with someone who didn't take tires and you did take tires, you're going to have an advantage. Speaking of friends, I'm realizing now that I've never once said his name out loud, so that means I don't actually know how to pronounce it. I've always called him Glomer in my head, but that could be completely wrong. Hi, buddy. Good to see you. He tagged me in some photos that he took of us, and they were really amazing on his Instagram. Shout out to I'm so sorry if I'm saying your name wrong, but this is a buddy of mine. I like him a lot. Always a clean racer, and as you can see, he gives me space here, and he's a good guy. So shout out to Glomer, and my apologies if I've said your name wrong. I actually have no clue how to say your name. I'm so sorry. Jumping forward one more time, we can see that Didiko just had to serve a penalty, so that gave me another chance to try to pass him on the inside like I could not pull off at the very beginning of the race, but because I had so much more momentum this time, it was pretty easy to get all the way in front of him. Now here's the thing, like I said before, Didiko is an amazing driver, and I did not actually think I'd be able to stay in front of him, but I of course had to try. Now, it would make a lot of sense to move to the inside to try to defend going into this corner, but I actually thought that I was going to be a bit more confident trying to keep up more speed than I usually would have and just take a wider line. And hopefully he wouldn't be able to go quite fast enough to pull off a full pass, and then I'd also have a bit of a better line going into the chicane. I don't know why I thought it'd be better to have the outside line going into the chicane. I think it would have been better having his position, but either way, I messed up multiple times, ended up losing a lot of speed by turning in the grass, but then he also made a mistake. So it ended up just being this comedy of errors, really. We both made some silly mistakes when we were earnestly trying to battle each other, and then that led to me being ahead again through the hairpin. We both pretty much got it back together enough to negotiate the hairpin, and then, of course, the battle was back on. After all that hilarious business, I thought it was probably a good idea to try to actually make an earnest attempt at staying in front of him, because a lot of times I just kind of roll over for the faster drivers. Part of it is because I don't really think I can win, but the other part of it is even if I can, it's going to cause so much slowdown. It's going to cost us to slow down so much that I figure it probably won't be worth it, because if I cause us both to slow down enough that anyone behind us can catch, then it's going to complicate things even more, and we're probably both going to lose out. So a lot of times against the really fast drivers, I'll just say go for it, because it's just delaying the inevitable. But right now, I kind of remembered that I know what I'm doing, and so why don't I make a real attempt at actually racing this man? After nailing this first corner right here, I was feeling really confident because I almost never nail that corner. And so in this period of need, when I really needed to get away from Didiko, I was able to nail that corner, and it set me up perfectly for this sector here. And so going into this corner, I wasn't even actually in danger of him putting on a move. I wanted to make sure I didn't enter really late, so I kind of double apexed this corner, and it ended up working perfectly. I came up all the way on the curb at the exact point when I wanted to and had a really good exit. I think that exit was actually probably better than in my time trial lap. The real test, however, is the chicane, because it feels even more strange when you've got all the fuel weight and the tire wear to think about. But I nailed it pretty much just like I did in the time trial, and I ended up catching, I think, 6/10 on the people ahead because they were battling. I hadn't really considered it at the time, but this next chicane coming up after this little hairpin right here is really scary when you have dirty air, especially if the tires are starting to wear. But my tires were not very bad right now, and I don't think I was quite close enough to get any of that dirty air. What was not lost on me, however, was that there was only one corner left and I was now within slipstream range, which meant that if I hit this nicely, I was going to have that slipstream, which would help us get a better lap, and it would help pull us away from Dpr. Luckily for me, I nailed the final corner as well. He made a bit of a mistake pulling him even closer, and I did get that nice slipstream, which led to the best lap that I had done all day. That's just a 40.1 still, however, and I've seen multiple people hit 39s. I do think that this car is capable of 39s even without slip if you hit a really, really nice lap. I did not quite make it, but I do think it's possible. Now, I did a bit of foreshadowing earlier when I mentioned that if you leave even a car width between you and the inside of this corner here on this big sweeper, then someone could sneak in there. You may notice that Dpr is still more than 2/10 behind, but when I enter a little bit late, he's already there. That was really all about me making that mistake, but I don't think most normal drivers would have been able to pull that off. That was incredibly deep braking and incredible control from Dpr. That is the kind of stuff that separates him from the rest of the people. That was a really, really amazing move. I can't even be mad at that. That was so sneaky. I bet there was barely enough room. He just put his car right there. He didn't touch me whatsoever, and he carried more momentum than I did. It was just really beautifully done. Jumping forward just a little bit, I don't necessarily want to just point out this guy's mistake. It is really important to know what to do in a situation like this, though. Since Baldini went into the grass, all 4 tires, that meant he was going to have dirty tires. It's an on-off switch in this game. If you put 2 or even 3 tires in the grass, you're not going to have dirty tires. If you put 4 in, you will. That means that most people are not going to be able to anticipate what's going to happen, or even if they do, they're not going to be able to control it nearly as well as they think they will. So do not be on the outside of someone after they get dirty tires going into a corner. I don't think I've ever seen anyone accurately hit the line they want to when they have dirty tires, and that usually means they're just going to slide past the apex. So at any point you see someone with dirty tires, just don't even go for a pass on the outside. They will slide off the line or go so slow that you should be able to just pull off a switcheroo or just go on the inside. So like I said, just do not pass on the outside if you see someone get dirty tires. Jumping all the way to the end, I was just short of a podium against the meta car, but we did pass many other of the meta cars starting close to the end, and we had a really good battle with Dpr. I think it was a really successful race, and it really did show what the Citroen can do against the V8 Vantage. And as you can see, Velosa actually won in the Citroen. So yeah, Citroen is a very good anti-meta car for this week. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'm going to leave you guys with a look at my current members. Thank you guys very much. I appreciate you more than you know.